The following program is sponsored by Rob Warner at Guild Mortgage, NMLS number 825102. Welcome to the Happy Hour with Rob Warner, an hour of stimulating conversation adding value to your financial future. Rob brings helpful insights into many aspects of the mortgage and real estate industry. Now, here's your host, Rob Warner.
Welcome to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. It's kind of a solemn day today a little bit. We all know what happened 16 years ago. I just wanted to tell everybody that my thoughts and prayers are going out to all the survivors and family members and everybody else that was connected with that grave event that happened 16 years ago. Before I introduce my guest, there's a couple quick housekeeping items I want to go over because there's a couple events coming on. I'd like to promote a couple of events. One of them is Ariel Jean Band. She's somebody that's been on my show before. She's up-and-coming talent. She's going to be at the Powerhouse in Folsom on the 14th of this month at 9 p.m. That's 614 Sutter Street. Come out and support her. She's local. It's her and her. There's three sisters that perform. They're really great. Also, September 22nd at the Nugget River Campground is Achilles Wheel. Boy, I said heel. That was wrong. That is a group that does kind of Grateful Dead type stuff, but they're connected with a realtor of mine who promotes musical events. So I wanted to put that out there. It's September 22nd to the 24th at the Nugget River Campground. And then last and not least, there's a spaghetti feed on the September 23rd Project Ride. They were on during my Labor Day show. Project Ride, really great for children and adults with disabilities learning on horses. They're going to be the spaghetti feed. That's at 8840 Southside Avenue. You can Google them or call them at 916-685-7433. That being said, let's get on with my show. Today, I am honored to have Craig DeLuz with us. He is the Director of Legislative and Public Affairs for the Firearms Policy Coalition. Craig, welcome.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your organization before we get started.
Sure. Well, I'm born and raised here in California. Grew up in the Bay Area. Been in Sacramento since 1992, so I'm pretty much from Sacramento now. I work for an organization called the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are a Second Amendment civil rights advocacy group, and I think we'll get into a little bit later about why we focus on that term civil rights. But we are a group that started really just about 4 years ago. Currently already have over 300,000 people who follow us through social media, who are part of our grassroots advocacy program here in the state of California, who contribute and support our organization. And we started off just in California, and now we're in California, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, and working in Washington, D.C.
What started you? What got you interested in this whole
Well, it started really with, becoming a gun owner and wanting to be a responsible firearms owner and educating myself not just in terms of understanding, how to use the firearm, but understanding my rights and responsibilities as a citizen. The more I learned, the more I came to understand just how those fundamental rights that we have, that fundamental right to defend yourself, our constitutional right to keep and bear arms was under attack here in the state of California, and how difficult the California legislature and various municipalities were making it for us to be able to know the law and be law-abiding in order as we sought to exercise our right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, I mean, this is my show is kind of a business show, but this has been heavy on my heart, this whole gun thing, because it's not just about the gun itself. It's about what you were talking about earlier, the civil right.
Well, exactly. We've been lulled into believing, that civil rights mean special privileges for special people. That, based on your race or your religion or your gender orientation, then you should have these special things like health care or a job, that people believe that these things are supposed to be for. If you don't have these things, we need to fight to make sure that you have these things because these things are fundamental rights. But when you look and understand the real definition of a civil right, it's a right that's available to each one of us as citizens here in the United States or as citizens of our nation. And we enumerate those civil rights in our Constitution via the Bill of Rights. Right. The first one is obviously the First Amendment, the right, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, and seek redress from your government. But the second most important one was the Second Amendment, and that is the right to keep and bear arms. And that's based on that fundamental right to be able to defend yourself.
So what started that? I was doing a little research. I know what the Second Amendment is, but you can probably explain it a little better why it came to be. Can you do that for us?
Yes, it was. Now, understand that the Constitution, when the Constitution was written, we literally had just gotten out of it. We hadn't been out of a war for our own independence. And one of the things that had taken place prior to that was the fact that they were the government. You didn't have a right to keep arms. And so in many cases, people were not in a position where they were able to stand up and fight against a tyrannical government, in this case England, who was seeking to impose their will on the people here in the colonies. So they understood first that we have a responsibility, right? And part of that responsibility is we have a responsibility to defend ourselves, to defend our home, and to defend our community. That's what the militia is for. The militia is not the federal government. The militia is not the army. The militia are those who are in the community who are prepared and armed, who are prepared to come to arms in order to defend themselves, their family, and their community. That's what the militia is for. Now, that is separate from the individual right. And that's what's really important about how people want to try and misinterpret the Second Amendment. The individual right, because it then goes on to say the people's right. It doesn't say the militia's right. It doesn't say the government's right. It says the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, recognizing that the first thing that a tyrannical government wants to do before it can impose its will on a people is to disarm those people.
So we were talking during the break, when you first came in here about how people think that if we don't have guns, we're going to have a peaceful society. There's that belief, right? If we could take all the guns away, we'd have peace.
Let me tell you, there is nothing more peaceful than a firearm than a firearm. Because see, a firearm does not inflict violence on anyone. If you take a firearm and you set it right here on the counter, it could be fully loaded. And guess what? It's not going to shoot anyone. Now, that doesn't mean that someone won't pick it up, but then now we're talking about the intent of that individual. That individual, oftentimes when we're talking about, when you hear the media talking about gun violence, it's not a gun violence issue. It's a violence issue. And violence is an issue not of a thing. It's not a knife issue. It's not a car issue. It's not a gun issue. It is a people issue. So when you start talking about dealing with issues of violence, or in this case, gun violence, we're talking about a people issue. How do we address the issue of violence? And that's the thing that they don't want to do. And quite frankly, gun control, in particular here in the state of California, has always been about making sure that how shall we say, people who would stand up to the government make sure that they are disarmed. In the 1850s, the first gun control law passed in the state of California was passed to keep Native Americans from being able to purchase ammunition and firearms. In 1924, the Hawes Act was passed. Now, the Hawes Act was specifically to keep Mexican Americans, or now we refer to the group as a whole as Latinos, and Chinese from being able to purchase firearms and ammunition. And then you had the Mulford Act in 1967, which was passed specifically to disarm the Black Panthers. Once again, another group that was standing up against the government. Now, today, the people that they want to disarm are any law-abiding citizens who would, any of us, all law-abiding citizens. If you are not law enforcement, they do not want you to be able to own or possess a firearm.
Do you know why? Why are they so bent on doing this, especially in this state?
Well, I think it's twofold. First, I think there is this illusion once again that we can just get rid of guns and there'll be peace throughout the world. And the thing that they fail to understand is when you pass a law, laws only affect the law-abiding. So when you pass a law that says, okay, we're going to ban all guns, the criminals are not going to get rid of their guns. They're not. Right now we have laws in California that make it so that you cannot carry a firearm on school grounds. Law-abiding citizens do not carry guns on school grounds. But guess what? That doesn't keep criminals from walking onto school grounds. It doesn't keep mass shooters from walking onto school grounds and doing what they do. Evidently they seem to think there's something magical about these signs that say gun-free zone. They think it's going to magically, a criminal's going to see it and say, uh-oh, no, we can't go here because it's a gun-free zone. Or they think that somehow a law enforcement or a criminal is going to say, we can't use this firearm because the magazine holds too many bullets.
Yeah, I don't know. I tell you, I'm just spellbound by this whole thing with them trying to get rid of guns. But we got to take a short break. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. We're joined again by Craig DeLuz, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs for the Firearms Policy Coalition. Hey, Craig, welcome back. We were talking kind of about civil rights, and we were getting off a little bit about the state of California and all the different laws through the years that they passed to.
Exactly. And it's kind of funny because I always get people who ask me. They say, "Well, how is it that you can, why is it that they believe that they can do this? I mean, if you treated any other civil right, if you treated freedom of religion, if you treated free speech the way we treat the right to keep and bear arms, everybody would just be going crazy in protest." Well, it's because for many they don't necessarily see the Second Amendment as a right, but it's not a right. You know what I mean? It's not like a real civil right. And that's because most people choose not to exercise that right. For people who for example, don't go to church, well, they don't really see a need to stand. Many of them don't see a need to stand up for the right to be able to have a church or to go to church. For people who don't write their senator, they don't really need to know, well, why do I need to be able to have a right to be able to write my senator or write my congressman? And so because most people don't own firearms, they don't necessarily see it as an important right to defend. And even many of those who do, the average gun owner, quite frankly, is someone who purchases a firearm. They may have taken it to the range one time to practice, but mostly it's probably sitting in their nightstand or in a box somewhere up in a cabinet somewhere in their closet, and it's something that they rarely ever see or do. So there's only really amongst all gun owners, there's probably a much smaller percentage of people who really know and understand gun ownership as the right and the responsibility that it is tied to that Second Amendment, that constitutional right to keep and bear arms.
Well, you would think more and more people are starting to get to know, though, about that, right? The word's getting out more, right?
Exactly, and that's the reason why you see every year over year, you see the number of firearms owners going up. You see the number of people purchasing firearms going up. Many of our members in the Firearms Policy Coalition, it's kind of funny, we're not a conservative group. We're probably conservative, liberal, and libertarian. Many of our members are women. Many of our members are people of color. Many of them are immigrants, people who've come from countries where they didn't have a right to keep and bear arms. And they're worried because they didn't have those rights where they came from, and they left there because they were being oppressed because they didn't have the right to be able to defend themselves. And now that they're here, they don't want to lose that right. And yet here in the state of California and in many other states, we're constantly having to fight as they seek to not only infringe on our right to keep and bear arms, but if you choose to exercise your right to keep and bear arms, they're actually even causing your other civil rights to be infringed upon.
I know we were talking about that Antifa, and I don't want to get into another topic, but how that civil right of the First Amendment's almost being violated as well now. That if you disagree with somebody, you can't voice your opinion, but, they're picking and choosing who can actually speak about something.
Well, exactly. And like we discussed, the problem doesn't necessarily come, first of all, when they seek to inflict violence on somebody, that's one issue. But when then the schools or the government says, okay, well, we're not going to allow conservative speakers to come because Antifa might come and there might be violence, but we're going to let the liberal speakers come because there's no conservatives who are threatening violence. Now you're getting into the violation of that free speech right. Once again, government picking winners and losers. We've got a lot of cases, a lot of things where we're dealing with here in the state of California, for example, free speech rights. This is going to sound weird to you. So did you know that a gun store owner cannot have the picture of a handgun on the outside of their store?
No, I didn't know that. Why?
Because California law says they are not allowed to have a picture of a handgun on the outside of their store. That is California law. There's a case that we're fighting right now, or one of our sister organizations is fighting right now with the city of with the Department of Justice with a company called Tracy Rifle and Pistol right now, where we're fighting that. There's also, in the state of California, many of the billboards that face highways are controlled by the state. When they give over, a lot of times they'll give over control of those billboards to local municipalities. One of the requirements they put in those things says there's certain things you cannot advertise. You cannot advertise sexually explicit material. You cannot advertise firearms or anything firearm related. Well, wait a minute. So, in other words, what you're saying is that these are businesses that help facilitate the exercising of a constitutional right, and you're saying that those businesses can't advertise on these billboards? Even our organization, if we wanted to stand up and say, ask your legislator to vote against this bill, we wouldn't be able to advertise on those particular billboards. Well, that's violation of commercial speech. That's also violation of free speech. Once again, all because, guns.
Yeah.
Private property rights, due process rights. There's a thing in California now, and it's something that's actually spreading across the country. It's called gun violence restraining orders or high-risk protection orders. These are cases where an individual, someone in some cases they have to be close to you. In some cases it can be anybody, can go to the court. They can petition the court. They can say this person is a danger. Rob is a danger to himself or to others. We believe that his right to keep and bear arms or his right to own a firearm needs to be removed. That judge would then hold an ex parte hearing, which is legalese for you don't know about it, you don't get to be there, and then they determine whether or not you are a danger to yourself or others. Evidence is presented. Now, the problem is we don't know what that evidence is. You'll never know what it is because you're not there. And then the judge then issues a restraining order saying you no longer have the right to keep and bear arms. Now, in the state of California, with that is issued what's called a gun seizure warrant. Now, this seizure warrant basically gives law enforcement the ability to search your home, your car, your business, any place they believe you might have a firearm. Now, and in this thing, they're basically just told, Rob is a danger to himself or others, and he is believed to be armed. We need you to take his guns.
And how long can they take the gun? Is this in law, by the way?
This is law in the state of California. And the problem is twofold. Number one, when law enforcement comes to take those guns, they're not showing up with the basket of cookies and flowers and saying, excuse me, Rob, would you mind giving me your firearms? No, they're showing up with a full tactical team in order to seize your firearms. Once again, you don't know. You don't even know that this has taken place. You don't even know that this hearing has taken place. Law enforcement just shows up at your door. Now, if someone is actually a danger to themselves or others, do you think that having a tactical team show up at their house to seize their firearms is going to help things or hurt things?
Hurt things.
I'm going to guess that it's going to hurt things. So, but with that, it's not only that, but think about this. So then you eventually get to go to court. State of California, they have to do it within 21 days, right? When you go to court, then you have to prove that you are not a danger to yourself or others. They don't tell you how you prove that. Do I need to go see a psychiatrist? Do I need to get an attorney? How exactly do I prove that I'm not a danger to myself or others? But also, the whole justice system has been turned on its head. I am now guilty until proven innocent. I have to prove that I am innocent when I go to court. So let's see. You have private property rights. You have unreasonable search and seizure. You have due process rights, as well as your right to keep and bear arms, have all been violated in this one process, all because guns.
Did this law, was this the one that was passed like last year? You know,
it was actually passed 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And no, I take that back. It was passed last year. No, 2 years.
Time flies.
It was passed 2 years ago. Last year, they tried to expand it. Now, it hadn't even been in place for a month when they decided, well, we're going to expand it now, and we're now going to include anyone you work with. So now think about anyone you work with. Let's say you work at a university, right? Anyone you work with, meaning any one of thousands of people, could petition for you to have your right to keep and bear arms taken away. Any instructor who's ever taught you in the last 6 months. In one state, it's anyone you have ever been in a relationship with. So anyone you've ever slept with can petition it. I mean, this, and you have people who are arguing this is a good thing, that this is okay, and there's very, very little. There's actually very little punishment to individuals who file something like this and do it as a sense of like revenge or something like that, as a way and try to get back at somebody. The actual penalty for false reporting is almost non-existent.
So who are these people that support this type of legislation? Do you know? I mean, do they really understand it, or?
No, in fact, they don't. And my experience has been is that I have sat as close as I am to you, right next to a legislator as we're testifying before the legislature, and have made it completely obvious that they have not only do they not know the subject area, they don't understand firearms, they don't understand firearms technology, they don't understand firearms law or how it's going to impact gun owners. They don't care to really know. Matter of fact, many cases, they don't even know what their bill does beyond the talking points that was prepared for them by their staff.
So some staffer puts together something,
and they sit down and they read their bullet points. And they're very, very, the one thing I'll give folks, once again, I lobby both in California and Nevada. At least I'll give the folks in Nevada one thing. When they sit down in a hearing, they actually get to the meat and potatoes of the bill. I may not agree with some of the folks that are proposing some of this stuff and that are arguing on the other side, but at least they're talking policy. Here in the state of California, it's kabuki theater. And unfortunately, most of them have made up their minds before they even walk in the room.
Well, we're coming up on a break. Give out your information on how folks can get a hold of your coalition, please.
The best way to get a hold of us is either through our Facebook page, firearmspolicy.com/gun policy, or just firearmspolicy.org is our website.
And also, I want to let folks know that everything that's on my shows, I never promote this that much. It's available on the Happy Hour with Rob Warner website and the Happy Hour with Rob Warner Facebook page. So all these shows are videoed. So if you want information or want to, go back and listen to this again, you'll be able to see it, and the show will be posted in about 5 or 6 days from now. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I am Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage, and I am going to take a minute to talk mortgage talk real quick before we bring Craig DeLuz back on, because after all, that's what I do for a living. I'm a mortgage guy. So keep that in mind, folks. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm a wealth of information for you if you have mortgage questions. My number actually is 530-391-1554. But I want to talk about, Guild, we have the new Fannie Mae home. It's not new, but we have the home style renovation loan available now, which for you folks out there that may or may not know, previously there was a 203K and FHA loan that you could purchase a home with and do certain upgrades to that home as part of the loan, energy improvements, different types of improvements to the home, and they would use the new appraised value after the future value of after the improvements have been made, and you could finance all those improvements. I'm being real short on this because I want to get back to Craig, but Fannie Mae now has that program too, so you can do it on a conventional loan. The 203K was an FHA loan. The home style renovation Fannie Mae loan, it can be used for structural alterations, landscaping, remodeling of rooms, kitchens and bathrooms, load-bearing walls, well septic repairs, handicap retrofitting, built-in spas, in-ground swimming pool installations or repairs, tennis courts, all sorts of stuff, really cool stuff. And you can put it into the loan. Naturally, it has to increase the value enough to make it worthwhile to put it into the loan. But this program is going to be a great program because it's a conventional loan and not FHA, so you don't have the mortgage insurance necessarily involved where you do on an FHA loan. You always have the monthly mortgage insurance, but on conventional loans you don't if you have 20% equity. So that's a real brief. If you want information about that, give me a call. Once again, 530-391-1554. With that being said, we're back with Craig DeLuz, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs with the Firearms Policy Coalition. Craig, welcome back.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, sir.
Hey, talk to me a little bit about some of the key legislative items, I guess you could say, that are being fought in the...
Yeah, right now the California legislature's in its final week, so at the end of this week they'll be done for 2017. We've had a couple of really recent legislative victories. One of them was getting the legislature to actually kill a bill that was Assembly Bill 736, which would have allowed the Department of Justice to impose fines upon firearms retailers. Which is, right now they go through tons of inspections, whether from the local, state, and federal level. And oftentimes, most of the infractions or most of the issues that they come up with are all minor things that generally they say, okay, these are things that you need to fix, mostly paperwork errors. What this would have done was this would have given the Department of Justice the ability to impose crippling fines upon them. And so that bill was, and in some cases, wind up putting them out of business. That bill was actually held in the Senate Appropriations Committee, so we were able to kill that measure. There was another measure, Senate Bill 497, which would have limited the number of long guns or the number of rifles an individual would have been able to purchase from one every 30 days. So you have only been able. It's basically the rationing of a civil right, 1 every 30 days or 12 in a given year. This was particularly we felt onerous because, in particular, we wouldn't allow any other constitutional right to be rationed. We wouldn't allow someone to say, well, you can only go to church once a month, or you can only buy one book a month. You can only write your legislator once a month. We would never allow that. And the crazy thing about this particular legislation is it has nothing to do with whether or not you owned a firearm previously. It had nothing to do with whether you were a law-abiding citizen or not. And that's the biggest thing, was that it limited the ability of law-abiding citizens if you wanted to buy a collection of long guns.
Oh, you couldn't buy the collection?
You could buy them, but you'd have to buy them
piece by piece.
Piece by piece by piece. And we figured the governor had already vetoed this idea before, and we were pretty sure he was going to veto it again. We were able to get the author to actually remove those provisions from the bill. So that was actually a nice legislative.
How do you do that? Talk to me a little bit about that process. How do you get somebody to remove that?
Well, you have to convince them that it's a bad idea. And not only do you have to convince them that it's a bad idea, in some cases you have to convince them that it may be something that will in the end hurt something else within their bill that they're trying to get passed. So this is a bill that also had to do with safe storage of firearms by law enforcement. That was something that apparently was more important to this individual legislator than the limitation on number of long gun purchases. So because of that, they knew that the bill would be killed, or the bill would more than likely get vetoed. And so that's part of what we do as lobbyists. Is our job is to help them to understand the political, the reality of where their bill is going to be. And in the state of California, that's not an easy thing, because so many people in the state of California, so many of the legislators are so willing to vote for anything that's deemed anti-Second Amendment. They're willing to vote for, even probably without reading it, but they're willing to vote for. So it's a challenge. The one thing I will say about our current governor, even though he has not been the best, he's not been the best governor when it comes to Second Amendment issues. He hasn't been the worst.
Really?
I
am surprised to hear that, actually.
He's actually been better than Arnold Schwarzenegger was. He was better than Gray Davis. Interestingly, the Gray Davis was successful in keeping most firearms legislation from ever getting to his desk. He didn't want to vote on it. He didn't, because he realized that he knew that he needed Central Valley Democrats and Central Valley. He needed some moderate Republican voters to support him in order for him to get elected or get reelected. So he didn't sign anything because, for the most part, it never got to his desk.
So guns and ownership. Gun ownership is across the board. It's not just conservative folks that have guns.
Well, and it's, the interesting thing is a lot of people think that because legislators, they think, if you're a Republican, then you're pro-gun. Well, there's a legislator, Assemblywoman Catherine Baker, who's authoring a bill that's going to the governor right now, which puts onerous signage restrictions and packaging restrictions on firearms manufacturers and firearms retailers. And she specifically said the reason she's doing it is, she wanted to, get in good with the Brady campaign. This is someone who voted for the semi-automatic long gun ban last year and brags about it. She voted for a measure this year that would that basically made someone, if you owned a firearm and there was a warrant issued for your arrest for a felony, you would now be a criminal just for owning a firearm. And she bragged about voting for that. She has literally gone out of her way to basically promote the fact that she does not believe in the Second Amendment. And once again, this is that's a Bay Area Republican, but it's still a Republican.
Oh my gosh.
So a lot of it is for people to understand that. Last year, even go further back. So in the state of California, during my time, as far as I know, there have only been 2 times in which Republicans have been in the super minority in the California state legislature. One was about 10 years ago when Republicans voted for the tax increase, and you saw then legislative leaders who voted for it. The next election cycle, they were all gone. Last year, there were a number of gun bans that came through, a number of bad gun bills. We called them gunpocalypse. That's how bad these bills were. And you had a handful of Republicans who voted for them. They are no longer in office, with the exception of one, Catherine Baker. And now we're in the super minority again. Now, the interesting thing along that whole thing, though, is that there are about 6 Democrats who voted against those bills. They all got reelected. In many cases, we're finding that when it comes to on some of these issues, it's almost better to have a moderate Democrat who's more likely to vote pro-Second Amendment than a moderate Republican who is more likely to vote anti-Second Amendment. And that's sad to say, and it's not the case with all moderate Republicans, but it does tend to be. We have found that to be that moderate Democrats tend to be a lot more pro-Second Amendment than moderate Republicans.
Well, I'm surprised. This is great information you're providing because I did not realize that. I got to go back real quick. There's probably a lot of people going back to that one gun a month thing that you were saying they were trying to pass. There's probably a lot of people saying, well, who would buy, more than one gun a month? What would you need that for? But that's not the point, right?
Well, no, it's not the point. This is not, and that's, the author kept saying there is no reason anyone would need to buy more than one gun a month. And my response to him was, it's called the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. But let's talk about who may need to purchase it. So let's say you're a competitive shooter and they have three gun competitions. It's a handgun, it's a semi-automatic handgun, a shotgun, and a semi-automatic rifle. Well, let's say you want to purchase a new set, 3 firearms to be able to utilize for your new competition. Well, guess what? You can't do it because 2 of them are long guns. Or in this case, now once it had gone through, you wouldn't be able to purchase all 3 of them at one time. You'd have to purchase one, then the other, then the other. Let's say you have 3 kids. You want to buy them shotguns as gifts. Can't do it. You're going to have to spread it out over months in order to be able to do it. In some cases, you're just wanting to purchase them as a gift, or you're just wanting to purchase them, multiples of them, in order to save money.
But it's not even the point. People need to understand it's nothing to do with your anybody's need. It's the restriction of government trying to impose restrictions on your rights.
Exactly. And the thing is that it's only going to impact law-abiding citizens, because criminals don't walk into gun stores and buy their guns. They don't.
I know. I don't know where this thought comes that the criminals are going to hand in all their guns.
Well, it's fantasy.
This is incredible to hear about these Democrats and stuff that actually support the Second Amendment as much. I would not have thought that. Hey, I want to read the Second Amendment real quick. I know it's not that long, but basically I'll read this part of it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Right? Is that pretty much it, right? Right there?
That's it right there. Now, some folks want to say, well, the people's right to keep and bear arms is tied to the militia. But notice it talks about the people's right. It doesn't say the militia's right. It doesn't say the government's right. There are two very distinct points there. Just like the First Amendment speaks to there's a distinct point of religion. There's the distinct point of freedom of the press, and there's the distinct point of the ability to be able to petition your government for the redress of your grievances, right? Those three different points. You don't say, well, one depends on the other. You don't say, well, if you don't go to church, then you don't really need a free press that maybe should be now run by the church because that's what they said. And then, oh, by the way, if it's not about the redress for the government, well, then you don't really need free speech. But for some reason, in the Second Amendment, they just got to tie it all together in order to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important that people understand this whole thing. Anyway, we're coming up on a break in a minute, but your information, again, is available. I just want to...
Firearmspolicy.org. That's firearmspolicy.org. Or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/gun policy.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, folks. Welcome back to the Happy Hour. I'm Rob Warner with Guild Mortgage. We're joined again by Craig DeLuz, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs with the Firearms Policy Coalition. Craig, what should people be doing right now?
It's one of those things where it's not, like I say, it's not easy, but it's simple. All right, and it's 4 basic steps. The first is get informed. Take the time to come to know and understand both the legislative, understand the process. How are our laws made? Fortunately, most of us have forgotten our old civics lessons, and even if they did remember them, mine never really covered state law and how laws are made. And most of the infringements we're dealing with right now are coming at the state level. So take the time to get to know the process. And, at the Firearms Policy Coalition, whether it's through our videos on our Facebook page or through the various different posts we have through our website, we really do a lot to try and make sure that people understand the process, but also understand the issues. And we try to make it really simple for folks. We'll have on each and every measure, we have a quick 1-minute video on this is the bill, this is what it does, in order to help people to understand exactly what the particular issue is. So the first thing is take the time to get informed. Most folks don't understand firearms. They don't understand the technology. They don't understand the industry or the culture. And they don't understand how the process works and how some of these bills work. So take the time to try and educate and inform yourself. The second thing is get engaged. Legislators actually do listen to their constituents. They may not always do what they want, but they'd make it a point. Here in California, they have a tracking process. If you are in their district and you call them on an issue, they will record who you are. They'll record what your position is on the particular issue, and all of that information comes up before a legislator votes.
So you mean you can, sorry to interrupt, but you can actually call and leave a voicemail of some sort? Or?
Well, you can call them. Also, through our website, we have on each and every measure, we have the ability where you can send an email directly to whoever's going to be voting on that particular measure at any given time. So we encourage people to take advantage of that. It's literally a three-click process for you to be able to send an email to all of the legislators who are going to be voting on these particular measures. Do that, and then the next thing is spread the word. Make sure other people know about it. The great thing about social media is that at the end of every post, there's this little thing at the bottom with a little arrow that says share. And so if you read something that you may think, oh, yeah, I know this, it doesn't mean that other people that you know this. So share that information with people. Help people to understand the issue. everyone has a sphere of influence. Whether, they don't have to be on the radio, they don't have to be on TV. Everyone has a sphere of influence. And by spreading the word and helping people to know and understand these issues and get active and engaged in these issues, we can really make a difference. And the last thing is, quite frankly, we're going to have to dig. I always say, dig your heels in and get ready for the long haul. We didn't get here overnight. A lot of the things that we're fighting legislatively, we're not going to win in the legislature, but we are in turn then turning around and fighting those things in court. Court battles take time. They take resources, and we have one case right now. I was telling you a little bit about it earlier about the sign on the outside of the gun store. Mm-hmm. That case has been going on for a while. We have another case out of Alameda County where they're trying to basically zone out all gun stores. We've been working for 5 years just to be able to have our day in court. Is how long we've been fighting that particular.
So who are you suing when you go to court?
Usually it's the government. So usually it's either the state legislature or it's the Department of Justice. It may be a local municipality like a county or a city government. Whoever are the ones that are in particular are violating whatever the constitutional principle is that we're fighting for.
And where are you getting the funds? Are they all donations? Is that
They're all donations. Some of our cases are funded through. When we win cases, we often will get our attorney's fees reimbursed. So then we reinvest those resources back into our cases as well.
So the Alameda, talk to me about that Alameda. They're trying to.
Well, what they did was they wrote a zoning ordinance that basically made it so that there is no place in the unincorporated county within Alameda where you can put a new gun store. In fact, even the gun stores that do exist in the unincorporated area don't meet those qualifications. Now, they're grandfathered in, but that's about it. So the point being, it's like 500 feet within a residential area, within a park, within a school, within a church, away from a church. So there's literally no place where you can put a gun store.
And there's probably no violence really recorded right outside of a gun store anyway, right? Or
well,
are there?
Exactly. There has been absolutely no study, no evidence that crime around, near, or in gun stores is higher than anywhere else. I'm willing to bet that if you did a study, you would find that it tends to be lower than most places.
I think you're right. People need to get on board on this because this is not just about one particular right. This is the door being open. What you were saying earlier
is the camel's nose.
Just because you don't own a gun, don't just put your head in the sand and just think, oh, that doesn't apply to me, because it's just one step closer to another right being taken away.
The first thing that they'll seek to do is and each tyrannical government seeks to do is to disarm people before they take away all the rest of their rights. And if they can infringe on one fundamental right, if they can take away that right, once your right to keep and bear arms is gone, what's to keep them from taking away your free speech rights? What's to keep them from taking away your due process rights? What's to keep them from taking away your private property rights? History is full of examples of tyrannical governments doing just that. So it's vitally important that I don't care what the fundamental right is that we're fighting on the forefront of right now. If you're not fighting for it now and you allow it to be taken away, all of the rest will soon follow.
And then it's too late to start crying wolf. You brought up a point a minute ago. I want to touch on it. You brought up somebody from another country that came here because they knew they had a right they didn't have in that country. I hear it all the time. I probably shouldn't be on social media as much as I should, but people are whining and crying about the United States, and how they'd be better off living in a country like, Venezuela or whatever. But I don't think people are thinking too clearly on what it would be like to live under a government that is so tyrannical like that.
There is a reason why so many people from all over the world are fighting to come to the United States. And that is because, our values, our belief in individual liberty and individual freedom, the fact that your value, that your hard work and your ingenuity ought to be rewarded economically. The fact that you can go from poverty to wealth in one generation is you can't do that. You cannot do that anywhere else, and that's the reason why people want to come here. And that belief in individual rights and individual responsibility, those are the things. And so if you're going to have that, that has got to include the right to keep and bear arms. It's got to include it, because you have a fundamental right to be able to defend yourself. And that's what I always say is, what's in the Bill of Rights? Those are not rights that are given to us by the Bill of Rights, right? Those are the Bill of Rights recognizing those are fundamental rights that you and I have as human beings that ought not be infringed.
It's so important. It's so important. I do loans for a living, so I talk to people from other countries that will say the same thing you said. They will tell me what it was like when inflation was 250% or whatever, and the way the government's controlled the money supplies and everything, on and on and on. So folks need to talk to people from other countries and ask them if it was why would you want to turn the United States into that type of situation? I don't know.
Well, and when you really come to understand, when they understand why where they came from is like it is, they understand why we don't want to be that. I always say, we are now a nation where, we need to be focusing on making sure we understand why America is successful, because when we understand why we're successful, we'll stick to that, and by sticking to that, we'll stick to the success that we've had.
Wonderful. Craig, it's been wonderful having you on the show. You're going to give out your information. I keep on saying this because I want people to be educated on this.
No, once again, I very much appreciate the opportunity. I encourage everyone, watch me every morning. I do a thing called Coffee with Craig on Facebook.com/gun policy. You can also check us out on our website at firearmspolicy.org.
It's been wonderful having you here. Folks, it's been great having you listening to my show. I'd love any feedback. Unfortunately, I don't have a call-in right now, but my number is 530-391-1554. Anyway, everybody, have a tremendous week. And again, we lift everybody up in prayer for the folks from the 9/11 situation. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you next Monday.
Guild Mortgage Company is an equal housing lender, NMLS 3274, licensed by the Department of Business Oversight under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Rob Warner, NMLS 825102. All loans subject to underwriter approval. Terms and conditions may apply, subject to change without notice.